Hello and welcome to episode 167 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Sigmund Judge, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Devon Dundee, for another week, rounding up everything around the world of Apple TV. But the weather's getting better, and you know, us British, Devon, we get excited about the weather.
Don't we all?
Well, this week marked a couple of things. First off, 22 years of iTunes. And so I was going through, I have a whole list of everything that I've ever bought on iTunes in a note. And it's separated by year. And I'm sure you probably can get AI to do that kind of thing now. But I did it all manually and put in the amounts in which everything cost. And I think after I did that, I was just a little bit kind of petrified in terms of, okay, how much money am I spending each year? And considering how much we talk about wanting to watch and highlight not just Apple originals, but everything in the TV app, my purchases have gone down somewhat. I'm actually saving money with streaming. For that reason, it means that plans are afoot with regard to an outdoor setup. We talked about this briefly last week, and I've talked briefly about, how I've had previous outdoor setups, but now I want like an outdoor projection setup. Us Brits, we've not had to deal with that or even think about that because sometimes we get no summer at all. But I'm feeling quite positive about this year. And so, because you're in the United States and you deal with obscene temperatures, I'm going to guess late night outdoor viewing isn't like a mystery to you like it is to me. And so you've probably dealt with plentiful of setups, either at yours or your neighbours or your friends and family. And you have a big family, Devon. So do you have any experience with outdoor setups during the summer, projection or otherwise?
Oh, I've seen all kinds of different outdoor setups, Sigmund. You won't believe some of the stuff I've seen. I went to an outdoor movie showing for a local charity, and it started off great. 2 dual screens, and so you could park wherever and see, and you just roll your windows down.
Oh, this was a drive-in.
Yes, it was very cool.
See, I've never experienced a drive-in in my life.
I think I've been to a couple, not like the really big ones, but some of the smaller ones like this. The problem with this setup was that the wind picked up, and they hadn't accounted for that, and it knocked the screens over. And this was my first time seeing The Goonies. I hadn't seen it as a kid, and I was watching it as an adult, and I really wanted to see how it ended. So we stuck around. They pulled up a trailer, like an enclosed white trailer, and pointed the projection at that. It was white, so it reflected okay, but it also had these like markings where it had been stitched together, and so there were like bulges in it. Anyway, we finished the movie, but I'll say that wind is one thing that you have to contend with these outdoor things, at least around where I live. I don't know how much of an issue that is where you're at, but that can be your downfall. The other thing that can really get you is ambient light, and so you have to be aware of not only the sun, of course. If you're watching at night, then that's less of an issue. Great time to start right at sunset as things are starting to dim down. You can get the popcorn out and get everybody situated and then watch in the dark. But you also have to be aware of other light sources, street lights and things of that nature. And so I've seen events that have been messed up by that. But, it's a fun experience getting everybody outside and watching something together. A lot of the ones that I've seen have not been super professionally done, but it's still a fun time no matter what, whether you're watching The Goonies or you're getting together for a football game, which is a pretty common thing to do here. It's a lot of fun, especially if you keep in mind some of those other elements. I have to imagine your approach is probably going to be something more permanent than a lot of the things that I've been to.
No, actually.
Oh, really?
I think this time it's got to be something that's got to be portable.
Oh.
Something that can be packed away nice and easy, because a permanent setup's just not going to fly, especially during the winter months in London. We get rain. Sometimes we get sleet in April, Not this April. So that's a good thing. But I guess from my perspective, it's a little bit different. I think we probably have less room. I'm very fortunate to be in London and have a nice sizable garden, but I am packed in. I've got houses behind me and to the side, just separated by a fence. I have to kind of keep in mind a little bit in terms of disturbing people. Now, we'll get into projectors, because the projector that I was looking at, or the company that I was looking at, was Anchor. And I actually have these projectors, which they come in all sorts of different form factors. As small as a Coke can to a big thing with a handle. Can handle a lot of lumens, and obviously the bigger the ANSI lumens, the brighter the picture. I'm looking at a projector that just got announced this week, and that is the Nebula X1. Big reason for this is 3500 ANSI lumens, so pretty bright. Can do up to a 300-inch screen, which is nice, because I want a bigger screen than what I can get indoors. Otherwise, what's the point? And it comes with 2 speakers, so they're Wi-Fi speakers. So not only do I have to sort out the audio and the video, I will also have to sort out how the network extends to the garden to be able to do all of this, because previous takes I've just been doing it with data from my mobile phone, because data's pretty cheap over here. Now, from a network point of view, I'm looking at Unify. From a projector point of view, I think I'm looking at that Nebula X1, or maybe the 4K SE that came out last year. They are plug-in power rather than battery operated, but I want that brightness. There's a lot to kind of contend with here. The one thing that I'm still unsure about is the projection screen. I think maybe a couple weeks ago I sent you a link to a screen that I was looking at, a inflatable screen. Now, I thought you just inflated it and it was good to go. I watched a video, and it turns out that the electric blower that attaches and inflates it then has to be on the whole time, and you get this noise. So do you have any experience with outdoor projection screens and what's worked for people and what hasn't? Because the reality is, when it gets late, I don't want to disturb my neighbours to the point that they've got like a big engine roaring. And also that means then we have to make the sound louder unless we find a way of attaching multiple AirPods Max to everyone that's watching.
Yeah, so now it's like one of those silent raves where you're outside watching something, but no one can actually hear anything around you. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. I've seen the blow-up screens and used them several times at different events that I've helped set up for. They are pretty noisy. I'll say once the sound starts, you kind of drown it out in your head. The other thing about these kinds of events is usually the viewing experience is less focused outdoors, just by nature of where you're at and how many other distractions there are. Especially if there's any children involved, they're not going to be sitting still, right? Because they just want to be playing and running around. So if there are more distractions, if you do end up having to go the inflatable route, it's not the end of the world. You do kind of adapt to it, though I completely understand wanting to be, respectful of your neighbors. But there are also projector screen frames that you can piece together, and they fit into a neat bag when you're done with them, and then they're labeled and you put them all together. And then the thing there is they're less durable against wind. So that's the other thing you have to keep in mind. I don't know exactly what's behind yours, if there's anything to support it, or if it would just kind of fly away with a big gust. But there's lots to consider with this outdoor projection stuff. The last thing I'll say is you talked about networking and sound and trying to figure out all that and doing it wirelessly. The other thing you can get away with more outdoors is cabling, because there's just not as much of an expectation of it to be nice and neat, and especially if it's a portable setup. As long as you're being safe about where you place them, making sure it's not in a high traffic area where someone's going to trip. if you have to run a couple sound cables or Ethernet or whatever, you're going to be okay. It's actually pretty fun to set up something like that and get creative with the process, and even going through the process of setup, tear down, take away. I enjoy it a lot, and when you can get a group of people together in an environment like that and pull it off, it really is a great time.
I mean, I do want fronts, surrounds, and rears. Because why not? Obviously, I can't do Atmos because where do I attach it to? The sky, and we don't have anything that covers at the moment, but that might be an idea. So, well, thank you. Of course, if anyone has any experience with outdoor projection systems that you and your family have been using over the years and want to impart some extra knowledge, you can let us know any tips you have and what your nighttime outdoor viewing plans are over the summer by contacting the show via all of the ways listed in the show notes, plus our new contact form where you can contact any of the shows on the Mac Stories Network. Well, with that out of the way, Devon, everything coming up on the show this week, we recap the incredible American crime thriller limited series Dope Thief, look back on the Apple Watch's first 10 years and the journey thus far, both of the Apple Watch and watchOS and our use of it. But we begin with our highlight of new French language Apple original series Carême. An ambitious young chef uses his seductive charm to work as a spy so he can save his father and make his name.
Food makes a country, along with its language and its art. The first taste we know. Food can often be more eloquent than words.
Does he make love as well as he cooks?
Bon appetit.
Created by Ian Kelly and David Serino, directed by Martin Bourboulon, and starring Benjamin Voisin, Jeremy Renier, Lina Kudry, and Alice Dalus. Tell us a little bit about this one.
This is a fun one. We're going back to the days of Napoleon, but this time with a sweet twist. So if you're a fan of Napoleon or any of the period pieces, I think in that era on Apple TV+, this is going to be a great opportunity to revisit that time. Antonin Carême is a young chef running a bakery with his dad when, by pure fate, he comes into the good graces of the first consul himself. It's really interesting to see how he comes across Napoleon and how he ends up catching his attention and setting him on this path that we see him go down. He's invited to join the palace's cooking staff and refuses, and that makes his family a target. So then, in order to get his dad out of legal trouble, Carême capitulates and takes his talents to the palace, where he's coerced to work as a spy for a diplomat named Charles Maurice Talleyrand. What a name that is. And so this has got a little bit of everything for us, Sigmund. It's got politics, it's got intrigue, it's got romance. If you've seen the trailer, you know there's plenty of that. And, of course, lots of sugar to go along with it all.
Having watched the trailer, I remarked how this felt quite naughty in some ways and quite seductive in others. We know Carême goes on to become the world's first celebrity chef. And, of course, all of that's entangled as well. But we're meeting him at, I don't know, a very different time in his life.
Yes, it's really interesting to think about the fact that this guy had this book written about him and now this TV series, but where we're meeting him, he's just running this small shop with his father. They're having conversations about how are we going to sell this fancy stuff that you're making, because regular people can't afford this. He has these aspirations to make these beautiful things, but at the end of the day, he's just a cook, right, on the streets trying to make his way. He's very focused on the art of his work. He strives to bring excellence and whimsy to the food that he cooks. You see that in his pastries, but you also just see it in the regular food that he's making. And his father, the team that they run, Carême gets into some conversations with other cooks about the quality of their work, and he and his dad have to talk about, everything doesn't necessarily have to be absolutely perfect as long as it's edible, and we're doing good work. It doesn't have to be the best. And so you really see his perspective on the work that he's doing and how much he puts into it and how much he cares. But he does seem content to hone his craft while working alongside his father and, of course, enjoying his one major distraction from his work, and that is women, which is very clear from the very first scene of the show, and it just persists through there. That's going to be an interesting thing to keep track of throughout the series, I think, is that a vice that's going to get in his way, or is it something he has to put aside for the sake of his work? It's going to be interesting, I think, to see that element, because everything else about him really is, it's about family and it's about cooking. And he's really, really dedicated to both of those things. I'll say when we meet him, there's a sincerity, and I used this word before, but almost a humility to him that's quite compelling in addition to his talent. I wasn't really expecting that based on the trailer, just the lavishness where we know he ends up. But where he begins, he's actually pretty approachable as a person, I would say, and someone that's really easy to root for.
Can you kind of see, obviously we've had hints in the trailer of the action that takes place later on in the series. Are there hints of that here, or is the first episode really just kind of like setting the tone, so to speak? Obviously, lots of eye candy going forward. I also wonder, for those maybe younger listeners, is this one that you can comfortably watch with your parents?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, having only seen the first episode, I don't know the depths that it's going to go to. I'll say it's uncomfortable, but it's still PG-13. It's not going to be anything that you can't watch with other people, although, everyone has to have discretion about that. But in terms of the action, I'll say it's mostly pretty under the surface at the beginning. It's implied that we're moving in that direction, and there's a little bit of it, but it's definitely a ramping up, I would say. This is setting the stakes and the tables for what's to come, and really putting the pieces into place for some of that action that we're definitely going to see going forward.
I'm going to ask you in a moment about how you think the response is going to be for this period piece in France, because the last period piece, Napoleon, didn't necessarily have the best reception from the French viewers. But from your point of view, I mean, you've established very much that you love a period piece. I don't know. Did you feel like you've been transported back to 19th century France whilst watching this premiere? Yeah, what do you think people are going to think of this?
I'll say for the most part, I felt transported. The costumes and set design were really well done, especially the kitchen set within the palace. The scale of it is just absolutely massive. It's an element that I'd never really thought about before. You've got this palace of people. How are you feeding them? And the answer is just dozens and dozens of cooks in this giant kitchen working very hard all day long. And that was really cool to see. But I did want to mention the hair, because it really feels like the male actors especially just kind of showed up to set with whatever haircut they had that day, and the hairdressers were just like, go for it. Carême has this really wild hair, which I think is probably just a part of his character, I would imagine. But it just seemed like there were a lot of modern hairstyles. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they were contemporary at the time, but watching it, I thought, it seems like a lot of these guys could walk around with this hair today and it wouldn't be that different. And maybe I'm just thinking too much about people's hair, but I did find it interesting that I thought it was a really defining aspect of Carême that his hair was so almost modern, and then it seemed like it carried on to the other actors. I'm also not totally sure what they're doing with the presentation of Napoleon, because the first few times we see him, his face is hidden, making me think it's an intentional choice. Maybe they're just not going to show his face. He's just going to be this imposing presence. But then they just kind of cut to a shot of his face, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess they weren't hiding it after all. So maybe that was a change that was made later. I'm not totally sure. Maybe they still were trying to go for that imposing presence, but then they figured out they couldn't not show his face at all. I'm not totally sure, but I thought that was an interesting thing to note. I do really, really enjoy the French talent on screen, some actors I'm not familiar with. This is one of the benefits that we get from these local productions that Apple is putting on, is that we get these talents that we've never seen before who maybe really popular in their home countries, but haven't had that global stage to really present themselves. Some really interesting work done, especially by Benjamin Vasson as Carême and Jeremy Renier as Talleyrand, two actors that I'm really enjoying, and I think I might have to check out some of their other work based on what I'm seeing here. Now, you asked me about the response, and that's hard to predict because it's not my perspective, right? And I totally understand why people watching the Napoleon film could have taken issue with that if that was their history, some of the decisions that were made. I hope that this is a little more historically accurate because it is being created and run by Ian Kelly, a biographer who wrote the book on Carême that this is based on. So my fingers are crossed that hopefully this will be received a little bit better, but not personally knowing the history and not having a lot of experience with this person outside of this series, it's hard to predict, but my fingers are crossed.
Well, I'm looking forward to checking this out. As I've probably alluded to, I'm not a big fan of period pieces, but I have enjoyed in part, The Buccaneers, which is coming very soon. And I wonder if there is a little bit of crossover there in terms of the audience, or whether or not this is just bringing something completely different. I guess the big question I have is, after seeing the first episode, forget everyone else for a moment, and I'm going to use this phrase, hungry. Are you hungry for more Carême?
Oh, I most definitely am. It's a really, really interesting premise, of course, based on a true story. So knowing that this is something that someone really lived to, but just the colliding of the food and the spy work and the politics and the intrigue all together, I think it's just really, really interesting way to put a show together. It's got a compelling lead, and of course the parade of sweets make me confident that this is going to be an indulgence to behold. I'm excited to see the rest of the season of Carême as it rolls out. As it rolls out. Of course, if you want to check out Carême, it premieres today on Apple TV Plus with its first 2 episodes.
Last week, we gave mention to Apple Watch turning 10, and we gave mention to the pin badges that were dished out to lucky customers that asked on the day. And I think if you go into an Apple store today, you may still be able to get one. You just need to present that you got the digital reward on the day, celebrating 10 years of closing your rings. I got you one because I know how far it is to drive to your local Apple store, so don't worry about that, Devon.
Thank you so much.
Although a little bit of trouble getting another, because really, I'm cheating the system a little bit there, but I'm doing it for a good cause. That said, I'm still super, super surprised that we're already at the 10-year point of Apple Watch existing. And I figured we'd recap what the Apple Watch means to us 10 years later. Our first impressions all the way back in 2015, leading up to how we use it now. And, well, should we start at the beginning?
Seems like a good place to me.
The Apple Watch came out 5 weeks removed from me personally having an aortic heart valve replacement surgery, which was pretty full on at the time. And I was interested, honestly, more in the tech than from a sports perspective, because that wasn't really the story that was being told at the time, right? This was very much, the Apple Watch was kind of centered around fashion because of the different people that were in charge at time at retail. And so we had a very weird launch of this product where, at least in London and I believe around Europe, you couldn't actually go into an Apple store that first week or so to pick up an Apple Watch. You went to a fashion boutique, and in London that was at Dover Street Market, and it was amazing being able to try the watch on, get to see what it was like in person. It was a one-to-one experience with employees from Apple, really showing you everything that had come together for this and how the OS worked and really how it fit into Apple's ecosystem at the time. And I've got to be honest, Devon, that first impression, as much as I was enamored by the watch's chassis and the design, which took some time to grow on me, to be honest with you, I was really, really not impressed with the operating system and how it worked. That first, day one watchOS implementation was so reliant on iPhone that I didn't really see how it fit. And so the first few iterations of the Apple Watch, I bought, I tested, and I returned. And I promise we're going to get more positive because once it really developed its story, it made more sense to me, and for many different reasons. For Apple Watch in 2015 and its launch, what was your first experience of Apple Watch? How did that go?
Well, at the time, I was actually less involved in the community around Apple and keeping up with every single product announcement and rumor. And so I remember hearing about the Apple Watch. I remember hearing about the keynote, and there's a gap between when it was announced and when it was released. And so I didn't totally keep up with the timelines and everything. It was cool. It was something I was interested in, but it wasn't something that I thought I really needed to get day one. And so I didn't end up picking it up at the beginning. I don't even know how exactly I came across this, but at some point, Groupon, of all places, did a deal on what was then the Apple Watch Sport, right? Because that was the aluminum model for the first version. And I don't even remember what I paid for it, but it was a significant discount to pick it up. And I just thought, you know what, why not try out this new Apple product, which it's weird to me that we're talking about it 10 years later because it still feels like a pretty new Apple product to me. But I picked one up. I just got the basic sport band. I didn't invest heavily into the ecosystem or anything. I just wanted to try it out and see what it was like. And I remember thinking it was cool, but I didn't totally know what I could do with it. I thought it was neat to have a timepiece from Apple that could integrate with my notifications. I think that was the big use case for me from the beginning. I knew that was a pretty big game changer for me, with screening notifications on my wrist rather than having to pull my phone out. But other than that, I don't remember actually using it for too terribly much other than just to check the time. I didn't install a bunch of apps on it or anything like that because, like you said, the initial hardware was so limited that it really couldn't handle a lot of those use cases, and I never had that sort of shattered dream of replacing my phone with it. I just kind of took it for what it was and thought, this is neat. I'll see what I can do with this thing. So that was my approach to it, and a really weird buying experience for me. I've never bought anything else from Groupon before, but it worked out in that case.
Really interesting. I just remember after a couple of weeks with the original Apple Watch, going to an Apple store and basically saying, hey, I'm kind of ready to return this. And I was amongst a number of people that wanted to do the same. Because what I was finding was when I wanted to pull up a notification, it was actually quicker for me to get my phone out because I was waiting for the phone to communicate with the watch, and that kind of thing was happening. That all changed for me later on down the line, but let's talk about our Apple Watch journeys in terms of the hardware. So you had the very first Apple Watch Sport, and then how have the upgrades been throughout the years since?
I think the jump from the original to the Series 2 was pretty significant in terms of the technology embedded in it. So I did go ahead and upgrade year to year there. And I actually went for a stainless steel one at the time, which also felt like a huge upgrade going from the aluminum to stainless steel. So I had a stainless steel Series 2. Then I guess maybe the technology still wasn't quite ready in that one because it did eventually crap out on me, and I went to check the time one day and it was dead and could not be revived. And so the replacement cost for that, it was out of warranty and everything. So the replacement cost of that would have been more than the cost of a new watch. So I ended up switching to a Series 4 that I purchased secondhand. And so I went back to aluminum. I keep alternating on the cases for some reason, but I went to an aluminum Series 4. Then when the Series 7 came out, I was enticed to upgrade again, that time to stainless steel. And then last year, as listeners know, I went to the Series 10, back down to the aluminum because of the jet black finish, which I still stand by and think is a great look. And so the pattern that's kind of emerged for me is, I know some people upgrade their watches every year and totally respect that if it's a device that you feel the need to be on the latest version. But for me, what really entices me to upgrade is the new form factors when they change the screen size and it's a change in what you can do with it because it's bigger. That's when I tend to upgrade and feel like it's something that I need to have or want to have maybe. I mean, I guess I probably don't need, to upgrade my watch as often as I do, but that's been my pattern. And I don't know, I've changed on the cases, I've changed on the sizes. I've ended up with the biggest one in aluminum and I'm really happy with it now. And I don't really foresee myself changing from that now, but check in with me the next time they redesign it. We'll see.
I mean, I'm surprised an Ultra wasn't even hinted at during this, but my history in terms of Apple Watches is actually a lot shorter. Series 1, again, returned. Series 2, tried, liked a bit more, but eventually returned. Series 3 was really where things worked for me. I think at the time, everything came in as cellular. Not that I ever used it, but it was nice to know that I could if I decided to upgrade my plan. And there was more of an effort in regard to sports tracking, and that's when I think the story really changed for Apple Watch, from my perspective at least. Maybe there was a bit of an effort with Series 2, but Series 3 was, for me, the kind of turning point in terms of sports tracking and health tracking. The health app really came into its own. There was, with every upgrade, there's just been more and more that you get to learn about your body, which is really, really helpful. And then I had the Series 4, which the difference was gifted to me, and I upgraded, and that was due to the ECG being included. Really, really helpful for me, particularly with different health issues involving the heart. And then I was just very, very happy with the Series 4 all the way up until Series 7, which was my first ever stainless steel watch, which felt like a massive upgrade for me. I love the look of the stainless steel watch. I prefer the weight of the sports watch, so who knows what's going to happen with the next iteration that I get. But the battery's holding up really well. And honestly, my relationship with the Apple Watch has been pretty steady for the most part, but there have been times where I've let it go and I haven't put it on for a while. We'll get into reasons for why that would be. But the other Apple Watches got handed down to family members, and then family members moved from that to like the Apple Watch SE. My grandmother has, my mum's an Apple Watch user, my dad was for a short time before he broke his, that I handed to him, and I don't think he's replaced it yet. So I think once you're using it day in, day out, you change your perspective on it. It's definitely helped me in a lot of different ways. But what were the elements of the device itself that kept drawing you in?
Like I said, I think from the beginning it was notifications, which is just something that at this point I don't really have a lot of patience for on my phone. Like if my phone makes a noise or buzzes at me, I kind of take that as like a personal attack almost. I really like routing all that through my watch. I just think it's better for me, for my brain, and for my ability to filter out those things when I need to just have them all handled on my wrist. And also just the use cases that have emerged over time, I think I was naturally drawn to from the beginning as well. Fitness tracking has always been something I've used my watch for. I don't necessarily feel like I need more information than it offers, and so it's just been my go-to there. Whereas before I didn't have metrics, I just did whatever and let it happen. Now I have some measurable things, and when I'm in periods of my life where I'm really trying to up that, I can push myself. And when I'm in periods of life where I'm more maintaining, I can at least know that I'm hitting a baseline and get some trends if things aren't going the way that they're supposed to. And I think those are really the two things that I've used the most. Fitness, notifications, and then health, like you said, constantly monitoring different things. And as Apple has added new capabilities, sleep tracking has been something I've really enjoyed on the Apple Watch and has forced me to wear it even more than I used to. I used to not wear it at night, and now I do. And at this point, having had it for nearly 10 years, I never wore any sort of jewelry or watch, bracelets, anything like that before, and I didn't know that I could on a consistent basis, but at this point, I'm really not sure that I could give it up. It's just become such a part of my daily use case and my workflows and things that I like to have. I mean, it's comfortable to wear. It feels weird when I don't have it on now. And so it really is a device that I get a lot of value out of and enjoy a lot, and couldn't see myself giving up at this point. Plus the tan line I have from it now is just so awful. It would take forever to even that back out.
I mean, I'll be honest, like from because something you wear is very personal, right? And the design is something that I grew to love. Wasn't something that was just an instant love at first sight moment. And from a Apple Watch Ultra perspective, I love how it looks on people's wrists, but I really don't like how it looks in stores. It's a real weird take. If I've got a friend that's wearing it, I'm constantly looking at their Ultra watch, and maybe that's where I go, but I don't know if I could wear one day in, day out. For me, it's very much a utility device. It's obviously, it can be whatever you want it to be, but from my perspective, I really had to hone it to do what I wanted it to do for me and what I didn't. So I don't get hardly any notifications on my watch other than iMessage, FaceTime, networking stuff, home stuff, that kind of thing, and a couple, but not all, social media networks. That's really helpful to me. But from a health point of view, I mentioned this on and off relationship. One of the things about the Apple Watch for me is it's been a very complex and personal relationship, in the sense that it helped me in my fitness journey and was a great tool. But then lockdown came, things that I was doing every day, I kind of stopped doing. And as I had other health issues, periodically, the Apple Watch became somewhat of a source of anxiety due to existing heart conditions and other issues. And I think it's really important to realize that Apple Watch isn't going to fix everything for you, right? And this is coming from a personal experience and a realization that really only came across maybe the last couple of weeks, with us knowing that, it's 10 years and this pin was coming, and wow, I actually haven't filled my rings in so long, and I've kind of let things slide for too long, and really I need to get back into the groove. So I think it's important just to say, obviously a lot of how you want your health and your well-being to be is down to you and down to consistency and that kind of thing. And you can get notifications and just ignore them, right? And you can use the Apple Watch as a fashion piece and nothing else. But the Apple Watch has really done something for me. It's had great benefits, like the breathing exercise for when I'm suffering from palpitations or anxiety. That said, if there was one thing I could kind of change with that particular app, is it's very regimented in its approach. I think you have like a minute or so. I think the Apple Watch should kind of pay attention to what your heart rate is and help you lower that heart rate. It can figure out whether or not you're having an anxiety attack based on your heart rate compared to what it would normally be, and could help you a little bit better in that. So that's just an example, but its approach, Devon, how do you kind of pair Apple Watch with your overall kind of well-being and fitness and health routine?
It's looked different at different phases in my life, going all the way back to when I used to run on a treadmill for long periods of time. And I'd go in, I'd start the workout on my Apple Watch. I'd put my iPad mini that we talked about, I think last week for our Earth Day celebration. I'd put that on the treadmill and hit play on something and literally just run until the show was over. Not thinking about anything else, not looking at anything else, just try to focus and really just put it all out there. And so that was great. It was great for that and really helped me kind of push myself in that time of my life when I really was just trying to go as far as I possibly could and get as fit and get that mile minute number down as far as I could and just be at the peak fitness. That it's been great for that in those times of my life. In times when I'm not quite as in training mode like I am now, and it's more about maintaining and just trying to be healthy and fitting in workouts just whenever I can in those little moments, I found that the combination of Apple Watch, Apple TV, and Apple Fitness Plus has just been invaluable to me, that I can turn on the TV and quickly pair my watch and load up a 10-minute yoga workout, or if I'm really feeling spicy, maybe HIIT if I've got the time and the energy. I mean, those things just wear you out, but they're awesome. And so the Apple Watch's role with that service, I think, has been really helpful for me too. And, they've kind of decoupled that a little bit and made the service to where you don't have to have an Apple Watch, but I feel like you really do benefit from those live stats and the effort bar and just the way it all syncs together and the way it's so easy to get started on your TV. We've talked before about how the multi-user experience there isn't quite great. You've got this huge screen, but only one person can use it at a time. But still, for me personally, the Fitness Plus service holds a special place in my heart, and the way it works with the Apple Watch and the Apple TV has just been incredible for me.
Yeah, I also like the community aspect to it, filling your activity rings and how that ties in with Apple Fitness Plus, which is cool. But I'm still waiting for the day in which, everyone can do a workout together across the web and make it more of a kind of social experience. I'm very, very basic when it comes to my Apple Watch use. I've never synced music or podcasts to my Apple Watch. I think I've connected AirPods directly to it maybe 5 times in all of this time, Devon. And from a Fitness Plus perspective, I'm very much using Apple Watch with entertainment in the way that you've professed, right? What I'm doing is I'm basically covering the big notification on the treadmill at the gym, which shows the pace and everything else, and I'm completely zoning out from any of that. And whenever I want to see any stats, I'll just very briefly look at my Apple Watch. But what I've set up is a day-to-day to-do list, but on my to-do list, next to my 10,000 steps or this much that I want to have travelled on my feet in a day, I'll also have listed in that to-do list a show or something that I'm going to watch whilst doing it. And then I'll also dedicate a show or something as a treat for accomplishing that workout later on as like a wind down piece of entertainment. So that's how I do it. I'll be honest, I don't really use Apple Fitness Plus. We have it as part of Apple One, and I'd love to try and get into it at some point, but I don't know. Are we in agreement here? Working out is a lot easier to do when you're not constantly reminded that you're working out.
Yeah, there's something to be said for the distractions while you're working out as well. I like the community aspect of Apple Fitness Plus, where you're in a group or you're with a group of people who are helping lead and doing it together. But I also have found especially back in my running days, putting on a podcast or some music or on the treadmill a TV show and not thinking about what your body's going through can also be really helpful. And so I like what you said about treating those things as like compliments to your workouts and also rewards for them. And I'm a huge fan of scheduling your TV viewing, Sigmund. We talked about this before too. So yeah, I applaud you. I think that's great. And whatever health, fitness looks like for you, I feel like there's a role for the Apple Watch to play. If you want that, something like that in your life, it's very personal. But whether that's getting on the treadmill, whether that's doing Apple Fitness Plus, maybe that's what I'm doing nowadays, which is more meandering walks out rock collecting with my little one. That's what we've been doing. And, whatever it looks like, I feel like the Apple Watch has a role to play, and it really has been beneficial to me in a lot of ways and can be to a lot of people as well. And I'll also say that watchOS as a platform is just really exciting right now. It's been through a lot of changes the past couple of years. And so we talked about how running apps and things like that hasn't always been the best on the Apple Watch, but I feel like it's come a long way, especially with widgets this past year. I find myself using those a lot more and checking in on my day plan, my to-do list, messages, things like that a lot more than I was before on the Apple Watch, which is great. And my absolute favorite widget on the Apple Watch, Sigmund, has to be the Now Playing widget, which I can use to control playback on my TV or my podcast app on my phone, or killer use case for parents here. When you give your kid your phone and you put it in guided access mode so that none of the buttons in the screen doesn't work, because of course you don't want them doing whatever they want with your phone and deleting all your messages and emails and photos. When it's locked down like that, it's really hard to make changes to playback, but from your watch, it still works. So you can pause playback, you can adjust volume, you can do things like that from your watch while the young one has the phone and doesn't have the ability to control the screen. So that is a little tip for you Apple Watch using parents out there.
We joked a couple of months back about maybe having a different review element where we see how the TV show or film that we're reviewing affects our heart rate.
Yeah.
Kind of based on that silly idea and silly premise, I was thinking, to tie in with me watching a TV show, for example, on my iPad or on Apple TV, I'd love the ability to be able to have our stats or even just our rings and the time that we're working out as an overlay across tvOS or iPadOS, because as we've both discussed, this is how we work out a lot, right? But yeah, the apps are fantastic now. The widgets are really cool. It took a while to get to the destination, but that destination is just perfect. And I really, really love it.
I agree with you. I mentioned that the Now Playing was a widget. It's actually a live activity, which is another feature that they recently added to that whole view. So there's a lot going on with watchOS, and it's really awesome. And if you haven't explored it in a minute, I'd recommend checking out those new features because they really do enhance the experience. Well, happy 10th birthday to Apple Watch. Here's to many more, a bright future ahead, and we'll continue going out and closing our rings the best we can.
Yeah, just no mountaineering or exploring for me just yet. When that time comes, maybe that's when I'll upgrade to the Ultra. All right, let's talk about some Apple TV news. Beginning with something breaking just before we started recording this very episode, Devon.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this was an intentional release or if this is something that's been worked on in the background that just got picked up, because it's not listed on the main Apple website as of now. But if you follow the link in the show notes, you can visit this new Spotlight page on Apple's website where you can learn more about your favorite actors, athletes, and music artists. Each artist page includes biographical information as well as links to their work across Apple TV, Apple Music, and Apple Podcasts. And they're starting with a limited selection that does include Cate Blanchett, Lionel Messi, Doja Cat, and several others. It's this horizontally scrolling view, kind of like when you're picking your favorite artist when you're setting up Apple Music for the first time, kind of those bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
It's that scrolling horizontally, and then you tap on the star that you want. There's no search or anything like that yet, but this is a really cool start for a feature that I think could be really interesting We've talked before about all of Apple's services and how they could tie them together for discovery, for people who are fans of different creators to get into their work and discover things across different apps. And I think this is a great start for that.
Yeah, very, very cool. Another bit of Apple news this week is the pill people are back. And that's because, I mean, they were back last week or the week before advertising the new Beats cables. I saw that video just today. That was amazing. And I'm loving these new adverts. 2 new adverts this time, celebrating new colours for the Beats Pill speaker, now available. Navy blue is a US exclusive, available from Walmart, which is very interesting. And blush pink is currently on sale from Target in the US, or should that be Target, with plans to bring it to John Lewis in the UK and Walmart in Canada this summer. The cost of the Beats pill remains at $150. And one thing I would say for anyone that maybe isn't having the grand expectations of an outdoor viewing experience that I do with a projector and everything else, you can pair 2 of these Beats pill together and they actually make for quite a good sound stage. So if you're looking to do something a little bit smaller, a little bit more portable, that might be an option for you, along with your Apple TV Go, because I'm sure I'm not the only one that has one.
In app news, Netflix has begun rolling out dialogue-only subtitles for original series and films, starting with the 5th season of You. According to Netflix, over 50% of Americans watch movies and series with subtitles enabled, even though English or Spanish is their first language, simply because they struggle to hear the dialogue. Sigmund, if only someone had already figured this out. Maybe a little feature called Enhanced Dialogue?
Yes, enhanced dialogue for the win. Yeah, this is really, really interesting. Interesting stat there. I was thinking about audio and dialogue, you know, and how it's changed for TV over the years. Because now that the line is blurring continuously between feature, film, and TV, and obviously the talent going between both formats, I wonder if there is something about the dialogue in feature film, because you are in a big theatre with big sound, right? Compared to the dialogue in TV, which was more kind of scripted and more pronounced, because it wasn't working with a big surround sound system, right? And that wasn't the assumption. I wonder if things have changed over time, just with regard to TV and its presentation, how it's written, how it's performed. But yeah, really interesting.
It's almost hard to know because everything's so customizable now. Like, you almost can't get just a flat what the output is supposed to be. And like I have so many settings turned on, like the enhanced dialogue and the reduced loud noises. So I can hear the dialogue really well on most shows, which I appreciate very much. This particular feature from Netflix, the dialogue-only subtitles, is something that Apple's been doing for some time. They have the subtitling option as well as the closed captioning option, at least in English on Apple Originals. I believe it's in other languages as well. So it's good to see other services doing this. I personally, when I use subtitles, it's just the subtitles. I don't need the full captions for everything that's happening in the background, different sound cues and things like that. So it's good to see this coming to Netflix. This is something that I would have benefited from when I was watching Adolescence, because I had the subtitles on there, and it did include all the noises and things like that, which can be a little distracting if all you want's the dialogue.
Also, from a Netflix perspective this week, they've also been removing Dolby Vision from a number of titles, which is interesting, likely in a bid to reduce licensing costs, which is kind of bad news for Dolby Vision lovers that prefer the enhanced color palette that Dolby Vision brings. Another trend that I'm not particularly keen on has been adopted by Infuse this week. They've updated their app to version 8.1.5, adding an auto skip intro feature for MB Jellyfin, and Plex servers. You know how much I love my intros intact, Devon. Also, this update includes improved handling of Streamlink files with multiple versions, and there's also improved handling for tracked subscription purchase sharing, is what I'm guessing. Now, one item on my tracked what to watch list, and of course my up next list in the TV app, is Fountain of Youth. We talked not that long ago about its first trailer, its debut trailer, and the benefits of watching it in the TV app. We'll get to that in a moment because I've got another one for you, Devon. But we got a second trailer, and I gotta say, a much better trailer for Guy Ritchie's upcoming adventure heist film, a global adventure it would seem. And I agree, Devon, this feels far more like a National Treasures movie than Indiana Jones. It looks great, but let's set expectations accordingly. I think my question, are you more of a Ben Gates or Indiana Jones kind of guy?
This might surprise you given my propensity for Lucasfilm and Disney. I love the series that they put out, but I've always leaned more towards Ben Gates and National Treasure personally. I remember seeing that film in theaters as a kid and just being enamored with that whole sort of adventure take, but also the puzzle of uncovering history. I think that's just a really cool element, and definitely getting those vibes from this trailer. Now, I do love Indiana Jones. I experienced those later in life, but I think something about the theatrical experience of National Treasure has always stuck with me, and I've always kind of wanted to recapture that feeling, and I feel like this might be it. And I love how this trailer really gives us a glimpse into how exactly they're going to go looking for the Fountain of Youth. It's just not a random search throughout the world, but they're uncovering these clues hidden in artwork, and that's where the art thievery comes in. And also the the great joke about sometimes it ends in jail. Thought that was great. So this looks like it's got some really great humor as well. So no shade to Indiana Jones, but this feels very National Treasure, and I'm very much here for it.
I'm waiting for Harrison Ford's hate mail now to the show. The trailer for Fountain of Youth, now available to check out. And I would say watch it in the TV app ahead of its May 23rd premiere, for not only superior video, but also superior audio compared to YouTube. Wow, did that trailer rocket my system at home. In terms of release news now, Apple original podcast Easy Money, The Charles Ponzi Story, will debut Monday, June 23rd on Apple Podcasts. It's hosted by journalist Mayo Liu, with the 8-episode docudrama blending immersive storytelling with investigative reporting, exploring the outrageous rise and spectacular downfall of the man behind one of the most iconic scams ever. It's led by award-winning comedian, actor, and podcast host Sebastian Maniscalco, voicing Ponzi himself, and he also serves as executive producer alongside Will Manati for @Will Media. Apple TV Plus subscribers, of course, will have access to all 8 episodes on June 23rd, whilst non-subscribers will get their first 2 episodes at launch, with remaining episodes releasing weekly through August 4th. So we're yet again having a bit of a switch up in the way Apple original podcasts are rolling out. Is this constant switching up, depending on the podcast, a little bit confusing?
I don't know. I guess it could be a little bit jarring going back and forth where you're doing a batch release for one series and a rollout release for the other, and it's like different dates for whether you pay or not. But we get a little bit of that in TV, right? Some series roll out all at once and others roll out week to week. So I think we're kind of used to it on that front. It's the jump over to the podcast world that maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect there. To me, what's not confusing about this, but it's still just an interesting element, is that these are still being released under the Apple TV Plus brand, even though they're podcasts. And so Apple TV Plus as a service is almost growing to encompass a whole different media, rather than Apple creating a custom premium podcast subscription, which may not fare quite as well without the scripted films and TV shows to go along with it. So it's definitely interesting. I feel like this is still in its infancy. The capability to do this is still a pretty recent addition to the podcast app to connect it to other services. And so I still feel like they're figuring it out. But I'm glad to see them continue to use it, and we'll see how that strategy continues to develop. In production news, the highly anticipated sequel to 2020's Oscar-nominated Apple original film Greyhound is set to begin filming in Sydney, Australia in January. The film will reunite the team behind Greyhound, including writer and lead star Tom Hanks, director Aaron Schneider, and producer Gary Goetzman for Playtone. The sequel will follow Captain Krause and the Greyhound crew from the beaches of Normandy to the ocean and the Pacific as they help turn the tide of the war. Talks are currently ongoing with members of the original film's cast, including Adolescence creator and star Stephen Graham, to return to the sequel, but nothing's quite been nailed down there. As they're aiming for a January start, I'm sure we'll hear more about those going through. But for people who have been waiting for a long time to hear about the sequel to this film, now you know. It's coming, and it's going to be starting up in January.
Very much looking forward to that. In development now, in another collaboration with Tom Hanks and Playtone, Tom Hanks, very, very busy. John Hamm, not as mad about it these days. Apple has greenlit a series adaptation of Philip Kerr's novel Metropolis from the popular Berlin Noir series. It's set in 1928, with Metropolis following newly promoted police officer Bernie Gunther in the intimidating elite Berlin murder squad investigating what seems to be a serial killer targeting victims on the fringes of society. Metropolis was the last in Kerr's 14-book Berlin Noir series, and Apple is said to be interested in further adapting the story of Bernie Gunther, and with the series being in the works for over a decade, with Tom Hanks and Gary Goetzman's Playtone originally collaborating with HBO on the project before it landed at Apple TV+. Doctor Who producer Brad Wolfe is also on board, alongside Conclave writer Peter Strawn. Whilst I'm very excited for this and everything that can come about from this very interesting story, I was a little bit confused because I thought this was the revival of the show that was cancelled during the strikes, of the making of Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
Yeah, I thought that as well when I first saw the news. I thought, oh, Sam Raimi's back, but that's not what this is. This is something totally different, just happens to have the same name. And it's interesting, this series, a lot of people have been comparing its potential to that of Slow Horses in terms of adapting a very long-running book series. They're starting at the end of the book series because it jumps all the way back to the origin story of Bernie Gunther. Kerr actually wrote that as the last book in the series, and I think it was published after he passed away. But it'll be interesting to see if that continues and if they can make, I guess, 14 seasons of that series. I mean, Slow Horses is doing so well. If they can capture some of that magic, there's plenty of source material to go off of for sure. Moving to a totally different genre now, Apple has also landed Christmas film Foster the Snowman from John O'Matt and Peter Hayek, an executive producer on the studio. Described as a high-concept Christmas movie with a hero like Paddington, humor like Elf, and heart like It's a Wonderful Life. Those are some big claims there. The film follows a childless couple as they take an accelerated journey through every parenting milestone when they're forced to adopt an adorable snowman whose whole magical life will play out in just 72 hours. The movie was the subject of a 4-day auction between Apple, Netflix, and Amazon MGM, with Apple ultimately winning out with a bid of $1.6 million against $3 million. The film is slated for a 2026 release, with Hayek telling Mike Fleming Jr. at Deadline, "The dream is this does land in theaters and that it will be the holiday version of F1." Another big claim there. They're really hyping up this Christmas movie, but it sounds like a cool premise. I like the idea. The name's cute, Foster the Snowman. I think this definitely has some potential, and with the couple of writers behind it, I think this could be something really cool for Christmas 2026.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what cast they are able to get together. And I can't tell, is this animated? Is this a mixture of the two? I love when we hear about these ideas early on, because you never quite know how they're going to pan out. But the holiday version of F1. I'm guessing they're not talking like a wacky races kind of job, but more more in terms of expectations and the grandeur of the film. So, yeah, interesting.
Speaking of casting, Jack Kesey from Hellboy the Crooked Man and Deadpool 2 will join Anthony Mackie and Jamie Dornan in Apple Original Heist Series 12-12-12. The series unfolds across 3 timelines of a heist: the 12 months of planning, the 12 hours of the heist itself, and the 12 days following. The series is set to film in Hungary, with Scary Coughlin directing the pilot episode. So, very strong creative team behind the series, and the cast is coming together. Sounds like a really cool concept, and I'm excited to see it moving towards production. This is one that we heard about a while back, but haven't heard much from lately.
And, well, I want to end our in-production news with something that's in production, but not at Apple, but still kind of related. Kool-Aid, the series. For studio fans, you'll get the reference. Of course, Kool-Aid the movie was the centerpiece to the very first episode of the studio, with Seth Rogen, featuring Martin Scorsese, who had this great idea of a film based on the Jonestown murders and the Jonestown massacre, in which Kool-Aid was used to poison a number of people. This great kind of idea and story was Matt Remick's get out of having to make a franchise Kool-Aid movie and make something more filmic and more of his vision. That didn't come to pass. And, HBO have picked up the rights to a very similar story by way of Bill Hader and Daniel Zellman. So it's really funny when you see these kind of coincidences happen. But yeah, very, very cool. So for those of us that were a little bit aghast and sad by the fact that Martin Scorsese's film was cancelled, I think we're going to be good with the series on HBO in the coming years.
Now, if only they could get Martin Scorsese on board for the series, that would be the move.
A little bit of awards news, a little bit more industry focused rather than Apple focused, but a big change when it comes to the Academy and the Oscars for next year. I'm surprised this wasn't a rule already, which throws into question a lot of Academy Award winners in the past, and maybe this makes our predictions game next year a little more interesting, Devon. The Academy members now have to watch a movie in order to vote for it. Again, a new rule, which, honestly, hilarious.
Yeah, imagine watching a film before casting your vote for it for a major award. I mean, it's surprising that this has to be said, honestly, I think. But, so the rule isn't that you have to have watched everything in a category, which I think would make even more sense, so you understand what you're voting for and against. But yeah, it's an interesting change, and only for the better. In terms of Apple FYC, this week the BAFTA Television Craft Award winners were announced, with Apple Originals taking home 4 awards, including Editing and Sound for Slow Horses, Original Music for Bad Sisters, and Children's Craft Scene for The Velveteen Rabbit. So congratulations to those winners, and we'll continue to be looking out for the winners of the BAFTA Television Awards, which are just in a few weeks and are, in fact, a separate award show from the Television Craft Awards segment. You probably already knew that, but for me, that was new information, so it's good to keep in mind. For this week's Apple TV releases, we're going to zoom backwards to last Friday, a release that neither of us knew about because Apple didn't tell anybody about it ahead of time. That's the latest episode of the Immersive Adventure series. It's called Hill Climb, and it follows driver Laura Hayes as she attempts to break her own record on the notoriously treacherous Piles Peak International Hill Climb race course. I've not had a chance to check this one out just yet. I've heard really good things about it. We're going to talk about it in depth next week. But for those with an Apple Vision Pro and access to this, be sure to check that out in the TV app. Today sees the premiere of Carême, our highlight for the week, as well as new episodes of Government Cheese and The Studio. This week's episode is entitled Casting, going back to the concept of the Kool-Aid movie, which I didn't realize we were going to revisit, but a hilarious episode for sure. Today on Apple Music, we see the debut of F1 the album, featuring music from the upcoming Apple original film, with its first single, Lose My Mind, by Don Toliver, featuring Doja Cat. mean, who else could they get for the debut single from an Apple original film but Doja Cat? Great to see her collaborating with Apple once again. We haven't had a chance to listen to this one yet because it's not out as of recording, but we'll leave a link in the show notes so we can all enjoy the debut single and look forward to more releases from F1 the album as summer gets closer and closer. Tomorrow on Apple Arcade, we've got this month's releases, including What the Clash, My Buddy, Lego Friends Heart Lake Rush Plus, Words of Wonder Search Plus, and Sumi Sumi Matching Puzzle Plus. I'm really excited about What the Clash. Every game from the What the series just makes my heart happy, so I'm excited to see this. And My Buddy looks fun too. If you want to raise a dog or a cat on your phone, you can do that. It's like the 21st century version of Tamagotchi, and some great additions to Apple Arcade this week. Finally, Friday sees a new episode of Your Friends and Neighbors, as well as Friday Night Baseball, the San Diego Padres at Pittsburgh Pirates at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, and the Chicago Cubs at Milwaukee Brewers at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Of course, MOS Season Pass continues this weekend with lots and lots of games. In fact, every game as part of MOS Season Pass, alongside a doubleheader on Sunday. Sunday Night Soccer, New York versus Cincinnati and Kansas City versus LA. One of them, I believe, is free to all, and the other will be in MOS Season Pass. It's not clear at this point of recording which is going to be which, but subscribers need not worry. On Monday, we see yet another episode of Big Time, the current Apple original podcast doing the rounds. And if that wasn't enough, we've got some extras this week. Wandler, the returning animated series from Skydance, sees the World of Wandler atmospheric ambience video on YouTube, alongside an inside look at upcoming Apple original series Murderbot, and to accompany that, a great interview this week at Empire magazine with Alexander Skarsgård. Really interesting remarks there with regard to how he really empathized more with Murderbot than any other role, which says something about Alexander Skarsgård. And finally, Apple Vision Pro Spatial Gallery was updated with a new behind-the-scenes look at previous seasons of Ted Lasso for Apple Vision Pro users. So lots and lots to play, watch, and listen to this week. But last Friday saw the finale to limited American crime series Dope Thief, and we're going to recap that series in just a moment. Now, normally we offer spoiler warnings and go spoiler heavy with our recaps, but given the limited series nature of Dope Thief, I'm going to be very vague in our discussion, so I'm going to leave it up to you. You can skip if you really need to, or you can stay with us. The choice is yours.
Well, for those sticking with us, Dope Thief follows two lifelong friends in Philadelphia who pose as DEA agents to rob small-time drug dealers. It's a perfect grift until they choose the wrong mark and become targets of a massive narcotics enterprise.
I'm going to explain to you what we do. We're posing as feds. We were ripping off drug dealers. But we went to the wrong house.
People are coming for us. Serious people.
Someone used you. This is what they do. They put their foot on your neck.
This isn't us.
We weren't killers.
Until now.
This limited series is created and executive produced by Peter Craig of The Batman, The Town, and Hunger Games Mockingbird 1 and 2. Executive produced by the great Ridley Scott, who also directed the first episode. It's based on Dennis DeFoya's book of the same name, and it stars Brian Tyree Henry, Wagner Moura, Marin Ireland, Kate Mulgrew, Nesta Cooper, Amir Arison, Dustin Nguyen, and Ving Rhames. Sigmund, we both had the opportunity to complete the limited series. We're going to talk about the plot as well as some of the key performances, but first, overall, what did you think?
I liked it. it met expectations. We were both excited about this limited series, I think, when we previewed this. And given the cast leads in Brian Tyree Henry and Wagner Moura, as well as Ridley Scott's involvement, the lines continue to blur between TV and movie. The series, I think it sets itself up well, right? We're taking on a ride with a couple of small-time Philadelphia crooks. They're posing as DEA agents to rip off a humble, small-time drug operation. And whilst that scenario is intense, and we've talked about it, it's the charm of both Ray and Manny that have you on their side from the off. There's a Robin Hood vibe to it, steal from the people that ruin lives and give to the, well, that second part never quite solidifies itself, does it? But the motives of both characters I thought were quite similar. They are both in a situation where throughout their lives they had to hustle in order to survive, and with poverty unfortunately comes the threat and the effects of drugs and addiction that both characters have fallen victim to in some shape or form, and that layer of the onion is slowly peeled back throughout the 8-episode run. Those episodes tell the many repercussions of a heist that goes wrong at the end of episode 1 from multiple perspectives. Ray and his relationship to his estranged criminal father and his elderly girlfriend whom he still lives with, Manny's on-off again drug troubles and the effects they have on his relationships, the relationship between Manny and Ray, which is quite complex in itself, and the story is even told through Mina Campbell, an undercover agent who survives after being caught in the crossfire during Ray and Manny's heist that goes so terribly wrong in that first episode. You've got great performances from Nesta Cooper as Ray's pro bono lawyer, Amir Arison as this really unlikable head of the special investigative team, and then you've got stunning performances that you come to expect really from both Ving Rhames and Kate Mulgrew as Ray's aging parents. And not only that, I mean, you've got loads of different factions all trying to work out who's doing what, and really being unaware of Ray and Manny for some time, alongside, of course, the dirty elements of the police force, which we will get into. The cinematography to this wasn't unlike anything that I've seen previously from both Ridley Scott and Peter Craig. Very gritty. That said, I don't think I've really watched something from either that's been more than a couple of hours. It's been a feature rather than a TV series. And so this is, whilst beautifully shot, fittingly, it doesn't have the sheen of other Apple original series, given the crime subject matter. And that's despite, of course, humour scattered throughout, because otherwise it would be a very, very dull and sad and depressing show. And it is in parts. That element, the gritty kind of muted tone element of this show, did kind of take its toll a little bit on me. Of course, you've got your expected standout performances and a surprise standout. But yeah, they're my thoughts. What did you think overall?
Yeah, I agree with you that some of the grittiness of it and just the bleakness of the whole premise definitely can take its toll. This is not a show that you're going to watch and feel great afterwards. This is not your feel-good series. You kind of need to pair it with something else, I think, to balance things out. But I will say I think it was a worthwhile ride and one that I enjoyed going on, as tragic as it was. I think you really got to the heart of it when you talked about the relationship between Ray and Manny. These are two people with a very long history, winding history, who have found themselves in this place, and you can't help but want the best for them while watching them make terrible decisions, just spiral deeper and deeper into this awful situation that they found themselves in. And it's tough to watch, but then there are these moments between them that are so beautiful as well. There's the humorous moments. there's the times when you kind of see their inner children come out where they still have some of these concerns and opinions that are so immature, but just in like a fun way, not in a dangerous way anyway. Just they argue about some of the silliest little things that humanizes them. And again, just reminds you that just because someone ends up in a terrible situation through a combination of decisions and circumstances doesn't mean that they don't have that human element as well, which I appreciate very much. It's also just thrilling seeing them try to navigate it and, all the different elements at play. There's mystery elements as well as you're trying to unravel who's done what and who's at fault and who can you trust and who can't you. And just some really surprising elements there, twists and turns that make it a lot of fun as you piece it together. And I'd say some of the big reveals throughout the series are very much downplayed just in terms of the way they're casually thrown out there. It's not super dramatic in that sense. It's very dramatic in the action and the danger of it all. But when you find out these different things that have taken place, they're just kind of tossed out there and left for you to take in, very much in the way, I guess, that it is for the characters as they're trying to absorb these things as well. You almost get to feel their shock in the lack of reaction rather than the heightened blow-up moments that do take place later in the fight scenes and things like that. So I thought that element was very cool as well. In terms of performances, of course, you got Brian Tyree Henry, who is just amazing in everything that he does. He's got such incredible range, and the emotion that he puts on the screen, it just can't help but impact you, I think. And again, he's playing this character who you don't agree with the things that he's doing, but you care for him and you want to see him healed in a way that only, I think, someone like Brian Tyree Henry can draw you in. And been a big fan of his for years, and I think this is some of his best work. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I haven't seen anything that he's not good in.
Mm-hmm.
He has this natural ability to draw you to him. And whether it's Dope Thief, Causeway, or Atlanta, he has a vulnerability about him that feels safe, doesn't feel forced. It feels like I'm watching a natural, human being that isn't acting, just being captured for us beautifully, I should say. So, yeah, I found his performance not surprising, but beautiful. And honestly, all you've got to really do to make a show work, it would seem, is have great writing. And if you do, get Brian Tyree Henry on board. Someone that we hadn't mentioned ahead, in our preview, all of our focus really was on Brian Tyree Henry, Wagner Moran, and obviously the names involved behind the camera, including Ridley Scott, who directed the first episode. But wow, Marin Island, the surprise standout. I'll be honest, being that I'm not like a Star Trek fan, and maybe, I've missed out on a few other things. I think she was also in Mildred Pierce and a few other things that I just haven't got around to watching. Was really, really surprised by her performance. She plays Mina Campbell. It's just a fascinating performance, right? Someone that tried to recover too quickly, lost the use of her vocal cords for the most part, can only really whisper now, has lost so much in life, and she has her own backstory, which I don't think is overplayed, and I think is very, very subtle. And if you're background watching this, maybe you don't pick up on some of the nuances, but she really brings her character to life in a way that I thought this was just a surprise standout performance, and great to see her given the time, considering she's not as big a name as the two leads.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on, when we did our highlight, what a big role she was going to play in the series, and she really comes into focus as it carries on. You talk about a character who has been through a lot and really carries it on her sleeve, but also has just a laser focus on the truth and setting things right and doing whatever it takes to get there. Just an incredible performance from Marin Island there. And definitely a character who, while I didn't connect with initially because I didn't understand her role, really grew on me as the series went on. And I agree with you, that's the other performance that's really going to stand out to me over time. Now, you mentioned the blurring of the lines between series and film, and that's something we've seen a lot with Apple TV Plus, with movie stars crossing over into TV and TV actors going the other way. And this is one that really does blur those lines in terms of it's a mini series, but there's a question about could the story have worked better as a feature film. So I wanted to ask you, in terms of timing and pacing and everything that took place, do you think this would have been better as one film rather than a miniseries?
I think it's too close to call in some ways. A limited series, let's say a limited series with a runtime almost scraping what's acceptable for the average moviegoer with a strong bladder. Though maybe we could have got to the point a little quicker, I think. Personally, I've loved the series throughout. Excellent writing, excellent performances, but by episode 6, I started to feel the momentum drag a little bit. You know, the final 2 episodes give us a 2-part finale, which I think is very captivating, really interesting, but we have to get through this conceptual episodes that we do see in a lot of limited series that kind of overstay their welcome a little bit. It's almost a chance for filmmakers to try new things, and sometimes it works really well. Episode 6 for me was really a difficult watch. It was uncomfortable. It wasn't particularly enjoyable for me. It was a gangrene-induced fever dream, which, as clever as it was, I thought really didn't need to be there. There were some shots also which, as much as I appreciated, there were some elements to the overall storytelling that felt like they were dragged out to kind of make the episodes. And could this have been maybe a 5-parter as opposed to an 8-parter? Maybe. But then, is that filling enough subscription time? You know, there is a business element, unfortunately, to the creative process these days that we don't cover enough. And so sometimes storytelling falls victim a little bit to that. And maybe that's happened here with Dope Thief. Overall, though, I mean, great bit of American crime storytelling. Unsurprising, really, considering who's involved, though, right?
Absolutely. I almost wonder if the runtime wasn't too long, but maybe they could have spent more time on certain elements that they kind of brushed over. Particularly, I think with Ray's dad, there was a lot of that story that could have been told that was just told through dialogue that we could have seen on screen that maybe would have been more impactful and kind of tie the story a little bit more together. This is another sort of convoluted story that I think gets explained well and it unfolds in a way that makes sense, but I do feel like parts of it could have been expanded, and like you said, maybe the dream sequences could have been contracted a little bit to make room for a little bit more of that backstory to make a little bit more sense. I kind of just wish I could have spent more time with him. I love him as an actor as well, and thought he was an interesting character that we didn't see too terribly much of. But I do agree with you that it is a constant struggle when adapting a story. You know, is this 2 hours? Is it 4? Is it 8? And once you pick 8, well, that's a lot to fill. And you know, how exactly you want to handle that. Sometimes I think the storytelling can get kind of lost in the middle, and no series is perfect. I do feel like this one did a mostly good job with its runtime, but there were a couple areas that I would have liked to have seen emphasized a little bit more.
Now, you know, limited series, they're quite difficult, right? Because where do you place them? Especially in terms of their importance to a streaming service. You know, I think the biggest and probably most impactful limited series to date for us on Apple TV Plus was Blackbird. So I've got a 2-pronged question to close this out. And that is, do you think Dope Thief is going to be remembered in the same way as Blackbird? And will it have that lasting impression? And where do limited series find themselves in the streaming era where there's always something new to watch, right? What's your take?
I like the comparison to Blackbird because I think that is a bit of a breakout in terms of limited series on Apple TV Plus. I haven't heard quite the same level of buzz for this one as Blackbird, but my hope would be that it maybe could be a bit of a slow burn, and especially as we're moving back into award nominations time, maybe Brian Tyree Henry could get moved into the mix, or Marin Island. I mean, I'd love that as well, and that could kind of help generate some buzz. I know that Apple's got their FYC house right now, and they had the cast out to do some photos and promotions there, so maybe we'll hear something there. But I think Blackbird was just such a moment, right? And Paul Walter Hauser's performance was just such an impact on people that it's hard to recapture that, but I'd love to see it with Dope Thief, and I think we'll have to wait and see exactly how that plays out. In terms of limited series in general, I'm a huge fan of limited series. I will always prefer a series over a film, just in terms of the way I like to take in storytelling and the way I like to spend more time with characters. Even looking at something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, they've moved more into the series world, and something like Daredevil, where you get so many more hours with a hero, you get more backstory with them, and I think the connection can just be deeper than spending 2.5 hours in a theater. Now, you don't get the theatricality, the budgets are different, so it's very different, and I think different stories need different mediums, and so I'm not saying that one over the other should be predominant, but I think there is a place for limited series, especially when it comes to a book adaptation. Adapting a single book into a film is just tough because you have to cut so much, and you lose so many elements of the underlying world building and things like that. It's just tough to do. So I really think that series are the way to go. And I love the idea of a limited series in terms of it tells the story and kind of lets it be what it is. You don't get the opportunity to do cliffhangers and all that kind of stuff, and you don't get the hype between seasons, but a story well told in 6, 7, 8 parts, I think there's a lot of value there. And so I hope that Apple continues to invest in them. In the streaming world where series aren't going as long, you don't have the streaming version of Grey's Anatomy that's gone on for years and years and years, or Law and Order SVU, right? In a world where shows don't go on forever, you need some shorter things to fill in the library, to tell those stories that aren't going to be told otherwise. So I'm a big fan of limited series. I hope that Apple continues to invest in them, and every once in a while you have a limited series that just does so well that you have to continue the story. I mean, Presumed Innocent, Bad Sisters, things of this nature that even on HBO Max, The Flight Attendant turned into that for them. That turned out to be a multi-season show. So it's not like you're ruling out the possibility of having multiple years, but I think approaching it as a single story that you're telling in this limited time, I think there's a lot of value in that. And so I hope to see them carry on. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah. I mean, I prefer the beginning, middle, and end to the story, and to know ahead of time what I am dedicating to a story. So that's all very important. But I mean, it is left fairly open should they want to do another season of Dope Thief, and that obviously would be completely original, not based on a book. So we'll have to wait and see. But for now, all episodes of Dope Thief now streaming on Apple TV Plus. One element of the series that I really enjoyed was the soundtrack. Lots of cool tracks, some comedic moments where some tracks just did not fit the scene in which they were played. Very, very cool. But the show ends on Anti-Up by M.O.P., which is one of my favourite songs ever. And it's a song that we'll link a video to this. Anna Kendrick did karaoke to on an episode of Ellen years and years ago. Still one of my highlights on YouTube. And with Anna Kendrick is where we're going to start this week's TV app highlights. Out now, Another Simple Favor on Prime Video. It's the follow-up to A Simple Favor, directed by Paul Feig, starring Blake Lively and Anna Kendrick as Stephanie and Emily, who head to the beautiful island of Capri, Italy, for Emily's extravagant wedding to a rich Italian businessman. I really enjoyed the first film, which came out a number of years ago now, so really, really happy to see a sequel On Thursday, we have the debut of The Four Seasons on Netflix. This is a limited series based on the 1981 feature film of the same name, about 6 old friends who head for a relaxing weekend away, only to learn that one couple in the group is about to split up. The 3 couples are Kate, played by Tina Fey, alongside Jack, played by Will Forte, Nick, played by Steve Carell, and Anne, played by Kerry Kenny Silver, alongside Danny, played by Coleman Domingo, and Claude, played by Marco Calvani. I'm really looking forward to checking this out. It's co-created by Tina Fey, Lang Fisher, and Tracy Wigfield, and the series is described as a hilarious and heartfelt love letter to long marriages and old friendships. In terms of movies now, and exclusively movies now, coming later this week, Bob Trevino Likes It is on PVOD. This is a South by Southwest narrative award winner, directed by Tracy Lehman and starring Barbie Ferreira, John Leguizamo, French Stewart, and Rachel Bay Jones. It's a comedy drama that tells the story of a people-pleasing young woman who is involuntarily estranged from her narcissistic father and unexpectedly befriends a childless man with the same name as her father. When meeting on the internet. The trailer really warmed my heart. This is definitely a Sunday watch, and whilst the premise will have eyebrows raised, I think this is one that a lot of people are going to really enjoy. One that's a little bit harder on the ears and eyes is Warfare from A24, written and directed by Iraq War veteran Ray Mendoza and Alex Garden of Civil War and 28 Days Later. The film embeds audiences with a platoon of American Navy SEALs in home of an Iraqi family, overwatching the movement of US forces through insurgent territory. It's a story of modern warfare told like never before in real time. Lots of series and films using this format, really interesting, and of course based on the memory of the people who lived these experiences. Personally, I've seen it. It's okay, but worthy of a watch just for Will Poulter's incredible performance. And the last of my highlights this week is The Ballad of Wallis Island. This is filmed over 18 days, directed by James Griffiths, and another kind of calm Sunday watch, Devon, so I know you'll be into this. It follows Charles, played by Tim Kaye, an eccentric lottery winner who lives alone on a remote island and dreams of getting his favourite musicians back together, played by Carey Mulligan and Tom Basden. His fantasy, however, quickly turns into a reality when bandmates and former lovers accept his invitation to play a private show at his home on Wallis Islands. And well, old tensions resurface as Charles tries desperately to salvage his dream gig. And again, the trailer, this is a real surprise to me. The trailer looks absolutely fantastic. Other movie highlights also coming to streaming following their PVOD debuts. Black Bag coming to Peacock, Inheritance coming to AMC Plus, and a film that I recommended a good few months ago now, La Cocina, is finally coming to Mubi.
Very cool. Some great picks there. And a good reminder that I need to resubscribe to AMC Plus because The Walking Dead's coming back very soon. And I can't miss it. So I'll include Inheritance on my list as well, since that's going to be on AMC Plus. For our up next picks this week, I want to share something that I found very exciting when I was just scrolling through the TV app recently to see what was new. I saw that Brett Goldstein has his own stand-up comedy special on Max called The Second Best Night of Your Life. Very well deserved to get him his first comedy special. This is based on some of his touring material that he's had throughout the year. And it includes apparently puppetry from what I've read, which sounds awesome. And the trailer, if you watch it, starts off with a Muppets joke, which I very much appreciated. So I mean, just a hilarious guy, obviously someone who knows his comedy, but also thinks very deeply about things. And so it's great to see him getting his own comedy special on Max. So check out Brett Goldstein, The Second Best Night of Your Life. Very
cool. And an easy joke to make, right? If you're blessed with such bushy eyebrows. I often look at him and think, in the kindest of ways, that he looks a bit like a Muppet. He's also the luckiest man in the world by today's standards, but that's also the title of my up next pick this week, coming to PVOD next Tuesday. It's set in 1984 and is about Michael Larson, an unemployed ice cream truck driver from Ohio who steps onto the game show Press Your Luck, harboring a secret, the key to endless amounts of money. But his winning streak gets threatened when the executives in the control room of CBS start to uncover his real motivations. Devon, I don't know if you've ever wondered, and I know you're a big game show fan, I don't know if you've ever wondered why game shows these days set winning limits when, back in the 70s and 80s, it could go on forever. This is the reason. This is a perfect true story, and I wouldn't even call it a true crime story, although depending on where this goes with Michael Larson following the game show appearance, maybe it will. This is the perfect true story of the biggest amount ever won on a game show, beyond, of course, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I've actually been obsessed with this story for quite a while, which actually saw CBS executives scrambling when the late Michael Larson worked out and memorized the patterns on the famous Press Your Luck show board, continually getting free spins and bonuses whilst avoiding the 1 in 6 chance of getting bankrupt in the game by falling on what they called a whammy. And I don't know, there's something devious and there's something about rooting for the little guy that I've always loved about this story, at least the beginning part of the story. It actually took until the early 2000s for these 2 famous episodes with Michael Larson to be aired to the public, which is how embarrassed CBS were about this incident. And I'm looking forward to the performances in this dramatization, starring, and this is a great cast, Blackbird's Paul Walter Hauser as Michael Larson, Walton Goggins, Macy Williams, and more. And a really interesting thing about Michael Larson also is he ends up kind of getting involved in a scam, or at least, actually, he ends up creating a scam online, the first ever to be investigated by the FBI and the FDA. So he's a bit of history there as well. But yeah, this is a fascinating story. And Paul Walter Hauser, he's a pro wrestler. He's an incredible actor. What more can you ask for?
Yeah, this sounds right up my alley. I mean, just these weird stories about the early game shows and how things went awry with a lot of them. You don't hear as much about this anymore because I think, like you said, they've locked down the rules so much. But back in the day when it was kind of a free-for-all and they hadn't considered the ways that the systems could be manipulated, yeah, it made for some really interesting stories, and this is one that I have not heard of, so I'm very interested to see this dramatization of it. This looks awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the most that someone had won before Michael Larson on this game show was like $20,000, which was, wow, how did you manage that? Michael Larson ended up getting $106,000 on his board, almost bankrupting CBS at the time. So, yeah, a mad story, and one we'll look forward to.
Well, he should have quit while he was ahead. And speaking of that, we're going to quit while we're ahead and call it for this week's episode. It's been a great time chatting with you, Sigmund. Thanks to everyone so much for listening in every week. We very much appreciate it. And of course, we want to hear from you, what you're thinking about, what you're watching, and if you have any comments on the things that we're discussing here. You can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes. You can send us a voice message via email or iMessage to magic@macstories.net, or you can use, as Sigmund mentioned earlier, our new contact form. It's available for all the Mac Story shows, including Magic Rays of Light, so follow the link in the show notes and you can leave us a message there.
We'll be back a little bit later next week on Thursday, where we'll be revving both our motorcycle and car engines with the debut of Long Way Home and a recap of Apple Immersive Adventure Hill Climb. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week.